The longest silence hides the deadliest rage, and the final judgment is always written by the victim.
The first time I heard the word, it wasn't even said to my face. It floated through a hallway like perfume someone spilled on purpose, sweet enough to disguise what it was doing. She's kind of unstable. I was walking back from the copy room with a stack of binders pressed to my chest, half listening to the casual voices behind the conference door. The laughter that followed was quiet, polite, the kind of laughter people use when they want to feel included without feeling responsible. I kept walking, not because it didn't hurt, because I knew exactly what the next move would be if I turned around. If I reacted, I'd become evidence. That's the trap people don't talk about. When someone decides you're crazy, your emotions stop being human. They start being proof. I learned that lesson early. His name was Elliot Klein, the kind of man who never raised his voice and still managed to make every room feel like it belonged to him. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't slam doors. He simply smiled when you disagreed with him, like disagreement was a cute personality quirk you'd grow out of. We worked on the same floor. Different teams, same projects. We met in meetings, shared deadlines, traded polite emails. It was professional, clean, simple. Until it wasn't. Our relationship didn't explode. It unraveled, quietly, like a seam coming undone in a coat you swear you just bought. He started canceling plans at the last minute. Not dramatically, just with that calm, reasonable tone that made you feel dramatic for even noticing. Work's been heavy. I'm just tired. Can we do it another night? Then came the bigger absences. Not showing up when he said he would. Leaving my messages on read. Smiling at his phone in meetings. Not looking at me once. When I finally asked what was going on, he didn't deny anything. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, and looked at me like he was being patient with a child. "I think you're overthinking," he said. That was his favorite phrase. It sounded like concern. It tasted like control. "I'm thinking the exact right amount," I replied. "You've been disappearing on me." He smiled. Not warmly, neatly. "See?" he said. "That intensity." That's what I mean. I remember how still I became in that moment. How quickly I realized the conversation wasn't about what he did. It was about how I reacted. He had built an escape route made of my emotions. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just stared at him for a few seconds and said, very calmly, "If you want out, say it." He blinked like he hadn't expected that. Like he'd expected me to fight harder for the right to be dismissed. "I think it's for the best," he said, and he sounded relieved to have a script. I nodded once. Okay. His face changed confusion, then disappointment. I could see him trying to adjust his expectations in real time. He wanted the breakup to be a story about how he tried, and I couldn't handle it. I refused to give him that. 2 days later, the first rumor appeared. A coworker I barely spoke to stopped me by the coffee machine. Her eyes gentle in that way people get when they're about to offer sympathy you didn't ask for. "Hey," she said softly. I'm here if you need anything." I blinked. "Need anything for what?" She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I heard you and Elliot. And I heard you took it kind of hard." I held her gaze. Expression neutral. "Who told you that?" She looked uncomfortable. "I don't know, just people. People. That word is so convenient. No one is responsible when people say something." I smiled lightly. "I'm fine." Her relief was immediate, like she'd been hoping my reaction would confirm she could walk away without getting involved. I left the kitchen and went straight to my desk. I didn't text Elliot. I didn't ask him what he'd said. I already knew. The version of me he was offering to the world was the one that made him look good. A fragile woman. A dramatic woman. A woman who couldn't accept rejection. Because if I was unstable, then he was reasonable. If I was crazy, he was safe. That week, I started noticing the small shifts in how people spoke around me. Pauses before answering my questions. Extra politeness. That careful tone people use when they don't want to set you off. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so deliberate. I sat in a project meeting on Thursday and watched two colleagues avoid making eye contact with me while discussing a document I had written. They spoke about it like it had appeared from nowhere, like attaching my name to it might cause a problem. When I finally said, "I drafted that," the room went slightly quiet. Not because they were surprised. Because they were deciding what my confidence meant. I let them sit in the discomfort. After the meeting, my manager pulled me aside. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. She studied me like she was searching for something that didn't match what she'd heard. "I just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed." There it was. Not concern for my workload. Concern for my temperament. I smiled politely. "I'm not overwhelmed. I'm focused." She nodded slowly. "Good, great. Just keep me posted." When she walked away, I stood still for a moment, feeling a different kind of anger than the one people expect. Not the hot, reckless anger that makes you text someone at midnight. The cold anger that makes you plan. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop and named it something simple. Notes. Not Elliot. Not proof. Not revenge. Just notes. Inside, I started saving everything. Screenshots of his last messages. Dates he canceled plans. The exact wording of the sympathetic comments I received at work. The time and place I heard the hallway whisper. Not because I wanted to punish him. Because I was done being surprised. If someone builds a narrative about you, the best thing you can do is start collecting reality. It didn't take long for him to escalate. He didn't call me. He didn't ask to talk. He didn't send an apology. He sent a message that looked like kindness to anyone who didn't know him. "Hey, just checking in. I've heard you've been having a hard time. I'm not trying to upset you, but I think it might help if you took a breath and stayed calm." I read it twice. The audacity wasn't even in the implication. It was in the framing. He positioned himself as the mature one, the responsible one, the calm one trying to soothe the irrational woman. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later, another message arrived. "I don't want this to get worse at work." I stared at that one longer. There it was. The real reason. He didn't care if I was hurting. He cared if my existence threatened his comfort. I stood up from my couch and walked to the window. The city lights were scattered like someone had shaken a jar of glitter and spilled it across the dark. I watched cars move through intersections, indifferent to my private war. I realized then something important. This wasn't about heartbreak. This was about reputation. And reputation is a currency in our world that people will protect more viciously than love. The next day, I arrived early. Not to prove I was stable, not to look unbothered, to watch. It's amazing what you notice when you stop trying to be liked. At 9:12, Elliot walked in with his usual calm stride, coffee in hand, greeting people with that effortless charm. He stopped at the front desk to chat with Marissa from HR, smiling like he was the kindest man alive. Marissa laughed at something he said. He glanced toward my desk, saw me there, and held her gaze as if I didn't exist. Then he walked past me without saying hello. As if ignoring me was part of his proof that I was the problem. At 10:30, I was pulled into a meeting with my manager and a senior colleague to discuss team communication. The moment they said those words, I understood what he was doing. He was turning a personal breakup into a professional concern. He wasn't going to say, "She's crazy." He was going to imply it through process. Some people feel the atmosphere has been tense, my manager said carefully. I sat back in my chair, relaxed my shoulders and asked, "Which specific behavior are you referring to?" My manager blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. She wanted reassurance. Tears, a confession. Something easy. "I'm just checking in," she said. "No one is accusing you of anything." "Then there's no issue," I replied, still calm. "But if you have examples, I'm happy to address them." Silence. They didn't have examples. Because there weren't any. But they couldn't say that out loud yet. Because the idea that I might be rational would disrupt the story already spreading. I left the meeting and went straight to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and exhaled slowly, not because I was breaking. Because I was realizing the game had rules now. And I wasn't going to play it emotionally. I pulled out my phone and wrote down the time of the meeting. Who was present? The exact phrases used. Then I did something else. I opened my email and sent myself a message from my work account to my personal account, documenting it in clear language. Met with manager regarding team communication, no specific incidents. Cited concern appeared to be based on perception rather than behavior. It looked boring, professional, unemotional. That's the point. People who build narratives rely on your messages. They rely on your spiraling. Your frantic attempts to correct the story. I wasn't going to give him any. By Friday, the rumor had evolved. It wasn't just unstable anymore. It was obsessive. It was not letting go. It was sending him messages. That last one made me laugh out loud in my apartment, alone. Because the irony was almost artful. I hadn't texted him once since the breakup. But he was planting the idea that I was. Why? Because if people believed I was chasing him, then him avoiding me looked reasonable. And if he could convince enough people, then eventually someone would say something to me, confront me, prompt me to defend myself. Defense is reaction. Reaction is evidence. It was a trap with a velvet ribbon. I didn't fall for it. Instead, I did the most dangerous thing you can do to someone who is manipulating your image. I stayed consistent. I kept doing my work. I kept speaking calmly in meetings. I kept smiling at coworkers like I had nothing to prove. I kept my posture open, my voice steady, my replies measured. I made it impossible for anyone to point to a moment and say, "There, see?" That's what he meant. And then, on Monday, the pressure finally came directly. Elliot appeared at my desk at 8:47 a.m., before most people arrived. He stood there like he owned the floor, leaning slightly as if he were doing me a favor by even acknowledging me. "Can we talk?" he asked. I looked up slowly. "About what?" He sighed. The way people do when they want you to feel guilty for making them explain themselves. "I don't want this to be messy," he said. I smiled faintly. "Then why are you making it messy?" His eyes narrowed. He didn't like that. "I've heard you've been telling people things," he said. I kept my expression neutral. "What things?" He hesitated for half a second, just long enough to reveal he didn't have specifics. He was testing me. "That I did you wrong?" he said, like he was offended by the concept. I leaned back in my chair. "I haven't told anyone anything about you." He stared at me, searching for emotion, searching for a crack. "I'm just saying," he continued, voice low. "People are worried about you." There it was again. Concern as a weapon. I nodded slowly. "They don't need to be." He swallowed, frustration flashing across his face like a glitch. "Look," he said. "I don't want HR involved. I don't want you to make this a bigger deal than it is." My heartbeat stayed steady. Because now the mask was gone. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about consequence. I held his gaze. "I'm not making anything a bigger deal. I'm just living my life." His jaw tightened. "Right. Okay, good. Then keep it that way." He turned to leave, then paused like he couldn't resist a final jab. "And for what it's worth," he said, "I really hope you get the help you need." He walked away before I could respond. Because he didn't want a conversation. He wanted a line he could repeat later. I sat still for a moment after he left, then calmly opened my notes folder and typed exactly what he'd said, word for word. Time-stamped. Documented. Clean. Because when someone tells you you're crazy, the best revenge isn't proving you're sane. It's proving they're strategic. And strategy leaves fingerprints. At 9:05, I requested a meeting with HR. Not to accuse him. Not yet. To ask a simple question in writing. What is the appropriate process for addressing personal rumors impacting professional reputation? A question like that does two things. It forces the company to acknowledge the issue exists. And it creates a record that I didn't start this emotionally. I started it responsibly. As I hit send, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You really want to do this?" I stared at the screen, feeling the air shift in the room like a door had opened somewhere behind me. Because now it wasn't gossip anymore. It was pressure. And I had the sudden, unmistakable sense that Elliot wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to corner me. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot. Then I placed my phone face down on the desk, lifted my chin, and smiled at the first coworker who walked in that morning, bright, calm, unbothered. Because if he wanted a story about a woman unraveling, he was going to be very disappointed. And I was going to be very prepared. The message from the unknown number stayed on my screen longer than it should have. You really want to do this? No name. No explanation. Just implication. That's how pressure works when someone thinks they still own the narrative. They don't threaten directly. They suggest consequences and let your imagination do the work. I didn't reply. I never replied to messages designed to make me move before thinking. Instead, I placed my phone in my bag, stood up from my desk, and went to get coffee like it was any other morning. People underestimate how unsettling normalcy becomes when they expect panic. By the time I returned, there was an email waiting for me. From HR, short, polite, neutral. Hi, thank you for reaching out. We can schedule a conversation to discuss your question. Please let me know your availability. That was it. No alarm bells. No accusations. But the door was open. I replied with 3 time slots and returned to my work without a single outward sign of urgency. If Elliot was watching, and I suspected he was, there was nothing for him to feed on. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. That gave him 24 hours. And Elliot never wasted time when he sensed loss of control. By lunch, the atmosphere on the floor had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No whispers stopped when I walked by. No obvious glances. It was subtler. People were careful around me, too careful. A colleague asked if I wanted to join them for lunch, then hesitated as if worried the invitation might overwhelm me. Someone else checked my tone mid-sentence, watching my face instead of listening to my words. Concern had fully replaced curiosity, which meant the story had evolved. I heard the updated version later that day, delivered with a sympathetic smile from someone who meant well and didn't realize the damage they were doing. He's worried you're not handling things well, she said quietly. He feels responsible. Responsible. That word almost made me laugh. He had turned himself into the caretaker of the woman he destabilized. Classic. I thanked her, excused myself, and went straight to the restroom. Locked the door, took a breath. Not because I was breaking, because I needed silence to think clearly. This wasn't about him saying I was unstable anymore. It was about him establishing authority over my emotional state. If he could define me as fragile, then any boundary I set could be framed as proof. So I stopped setting visible boundaries. Instead, I started laying traps. That evening I went home and opened my laptop. I created a document and titled it simply, Timeline. I didn't add commentary. I didn't vent. I didn't speculate. I wrote dates. The breakup. The first rumor. The coffee machine conversation. The team communication meeting. The message from the unknown number. Under each date, I added direct quotes. Screenshots. Times. No adjectives. No emotions. Just facts. Then I did something else. I searched Elliot's name in my inbox. What I found surprised me, not because it was dramatic, but because it was consistent. Emails where he subtly positioned himself as the decision maker. Messages where he reframed disagreements as misunderstandings. Threads where he summarized conversations in ways that favored him. He had always done this. I just hadn't been the target before. Patterns don't emerge when you're inside them. They emerge when you step back. The next morning, he cornered me near the elevators. This time, there were witnesses. Can we talk? He asked, voice soft enough to sound reasonable to anyone nearby. I looked at him. About work? He smiled faintly. About us. This tension. I tilted my head slightly. I'm not experiencing tension. That threw him. He leaned closer. People are concerned. I met his gaze. Then they should talk to me directly. His smile tightened. I'm trying to protect you. There it was. I nodded slowly. Please stop. It was the first direct request I'd made since the breakup. And it was measured. Calm. Clear. His eyes flashed irritation, masked as patience. I'm just saying, he replied, louder now. I don't want you to hurt your career because you're emotional right now. I took a small step back, ensuring the distance was visible. I've asked you to stop, I said evenly. This conversation is inappropriate. People nearby went quiet, not because of drama. Because of clarity, Elliot noticed. He straightened, laughed lightly, raised his hands as if surrendering. "See?" he said, glancing around. "This is what I mean." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The damage was done. Not to me. To him. When someone shows their hand too early, they forget who's watching. I walked away without another word. At exactly 2 p.m., I walked into HR. I sat down across from Marisa, the same woman Elliot had charmed at the front desk days earlier. She smiled professionally. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for meeting with me," I replied. She asked how she could help. I didn't accuse. I didn't dramatize. I asked questions. What is the protocol if an employee spreads personal narratives about a colleague's mental state? What qualifies as repeated unwanted contact after a personal relationship ends? How should an employee document concerns if they feel their reputation is being impacted indirectly? Marissa listened carefully, taking notes. "Is there a specific situation you're referring to?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes." And then, calmly, I slid my laptop forward and opened the timeline. I didn't push it toward her. I let her ask. She scanned the first page. Then the second. Her expression didn't change much, but something in her posture did. Professional concern shifted into attention. "Do you have evidence for these entries?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "All documented." She nodded slowly. "Thank you for bringing this forward." I didn't ask what would happen next. I already knew. Once a narrative enters a system that values liability over charm, it stops being personal. It becomes procedural. When I returned to my desk, Elliot wasn't there. He came in late that afternoon, avoided eye contact, and left early. By the end of the week, the tone had changed again. Not toward me, toward him. People stopped asking if I was okay. They started watching him. Carefully. And the most interesting part? He felt it. That night, my phone buzzed again. A message from the same unknown number. "This is getting out of hand." I stared at it for a moment, then typed my first reply since all of this began. "Please do not contact me again." Nothing else. No explanation, no emotion. A boundary so clean it couldn't be rewritten. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. I blocked the number. And for the first time since the word crazy had floated through that hallway, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because I was winning, but because the game had changed. He thought the story was about my instability. He was wrong. It was about his pattern. And patterns, once documented, don't disappear. They wait. The first thing people don't understand about reputations is that they don't collapse all at once. They crack. A joke that doesn't land the way it used to. A smile that comes a second too late. A room that goes quiet when you walk in. It's small at first, almost invisible. And then, suddenly, it's all anyone can see. After I blocked the unknown number, I didn't feel relief. Not yet. Relief comes after the last attempt. What I felt was anticipation. Because I knew Elliot. He wasn't done. Men who build their stability on your instability don't walk away when you refuse to play. They double down. They escalate. They search for a new angle. And the moment they realize they can't make you react emotionally, they try to provoke a reaction professionally. Monday morning I arrived at the office at 8:15. I didn't do it to be seen. I did it to be ahead. My desk looked the same. My calendar looked the same. My face looked the same, calm, soft, composed. But the building felt different. Like the air was waiting. At 9:03, my manager sent me a meeting invite. Subject: quick check-in, no agenda. No notes, just a time and a room number. The room was small glass walls, one long table, a monitor on the far end. When I walked in, Marissa from HR was already seated beside my manager, a notebook in front of her. A pen held neatly between her fingers. They didn't smile the way they usually did. That told me everything. "Thank you for coming," my manager said, voice carefully neutral. Marissa nodded. "This is just a conversation." Just a conversation. That phrase always means, we're documenting. I sat down smoothly and placed my bag on the floor. I didn't fidget. I didn't ask why. I waited. My manager cleared her throat. We've received concerns about workplace dynamics. Okay, I said. Marissa watched my face closely, like she expected me to flinch. I didn't. My manager continued. There are claims that you've been discussing personal matters with colleagues in a way that makes them uncomfortable. I held her gaze. What specifically have I said? A pause. Marissa glanced at her notes. The report indicates you've implied a colleague has been targeting you. I nodded slowly. I have not implied it. I documented it. Another pause. My manager's tone tightened slightly. Vivian, we just want to ensure everyone feels safe and supported. Safe, supported. Words that can mean anything when you don't ask for definitions. So, I said evenly. To be clear, someone reported that I discussed a personal matter. Can you tell me what was said by whom and when? My manager blinked. That wasn't the response she expected. She expected an emotional explanation, not a procedural request. Marissa interjected smoothly. We can't always disclose identities. I understand, I said. Then disclose the behavior. What did I say? Silence. It lasted long enough for the imbalance to become visible. This meeting wasn't about my behavior. It was about testing whether I would panic. Marissa finally spoke. It may not be a direct quote. Sometimes it's about how something is perceived. I leaned back slightly. Perception is not misconduct. My manager shifted uncomfortably. Vivian, I'm not being defensive, I said calmly. I'm being precise. If there's a concern, I want to address it properly. But vague claims based on perception can be manipulated. The word manipulated landed like a stone dropped into still water. Marissa's eyes flickered. My manager swallowed, because they both knew it was true. I opened my laptop, turned it toward them, and said softly, I came prepared. I didn't say it like a threat. I said it like a professional. I opened the timeline. The same document Marissa had seen before, now expanded, cleaner, more detailed, more complete. I scrolled to the entry marked unknown number. You really want to do this? And then the follow-up. This is getting out of hand. Then I scrolled to my own reply. Please do not contact me again. Then, without drama, I clicked open the attached screenshots. Marissa's posture shifted. My manager stared at the screen. No one spoke. Because now, the meeting had a problem. A problem named evidence. Marissa cleared her throat. Thank you for providing this. I'm not asking for punishment, I said. I'm asking for boundaries and professionalism. My manager looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as the fragile woman in Elliot's story, but as someone who could hold a line without raising her voice. Marissa nodded once. We will follow up. When I left the room, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt anchored. Because the truth had entered the system. And once something is in writing, it stops being a rumor. It becomes a liability. By lunch, Elliot was walking through the office like a man trying not to look hunted. His smile was smaller. His laughter flatter. His charm slightly delayed, like he had to decide which version of himself to present. I saw him speak to two colleagues near the printers. He leaned in, gesturing lightly, trying to control the narrative again. But narratives behave differently when people start noticing inconsistencies. At 2:40 p.m., I received an email from Marissa. Subject: follow-up. Inside, one sentence stood out. Please refrain from direct contact with Mr. Klein while we review the information provided. Please refrain. While we review. Not stop spreading rumors. Not manage your emotions. Review. That word was everything. The next message arrived that evening, this time from Elliot and this time from his known number, as if he'd decided subtlety was no longer necessary. You're doing this on purpose. I stared at it for a moment, then took a screenshot. I didn't respond. 2 minutes later. You're trying to ruin me. Screenshot. 3 minutes later. I was trying to help you. You're proving my point. That one almost made me smile. Because he couldn't hear himself. He was still saying the same thing. You are unstable. Therefore, I am justified. He didn't understand that every message he sent was a fingerprint. At 9:18 p.m. he called. I didn't answer. At 9:22 p.m., he called again. I didn't answer. At 9:27 p.m., I received a voicemail. I didn't listen to it immediately. I saved it. I went for a walk instead. The air outside was cool, clean, indifferent to human drama. People moved through the city with shopping bags, phone calls, laughter. No one knew my name. No one cared about Elliot's story. I realized something then that felt almost sacred. My life was larger than the room he built his power in. When I came home, I listened to the voicemail. His voice was calm at first, too calm like he was forcing it. Vivian, hey. Listen, I don't know what you think you're doing, but it needs to stop. Then the calm cracked. You're making me look like a monster. You're making people treat me differently. A pause. And then, in the most honest moment he'd ever given me, he said, I didn't think you'd fight back. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say I lied. He said, I didn't think you'd fight back. As if my dignity was a surprise. As if defending my reality was an act of betrayal. I saved the voicemail and uploaded it into my folder. Then I wrote one final email. Not to him. To Marisa. I attached the new screenshots in the voicemail file. And I wrote in clean professional language. Additional contact attempts and statements were received following the meeting. Please add to the ongoing review. I request this be formally documented as repeated unwanted contact. No emotion, no adjectives. Just record. The next day, Elliot didn't show up. He came in late. Spoke to no one. Went straight into a conference room with Marissa and my manager. The door closed. The glass walls made silhouettes of them, 3 shapes in a room where control was being redistributed. He emerged 20 minutes later with a face that looked carefully arranged. But his hands told the truth. His fingers wouldn't stop moving. His jaw was tight. His eyes avoided the open floor. He walked past my desk without looking at me. As if looking would confirm something he couldn't afford to admit. I watched him disappear into the elevator and felt something settle inside me. Not victory. Completion. By Friday, the announcement was quiet. Elliot was taking time away, while internal matters were reviewed. People didn't ask questions out loud. They asked them with their eyes, with their silence, with their sudden unwillingness to repeat his words anymore. By the second week, he resigned. No farewell email, no goodbye, just absence. And absence does something interesting. It removes the final distraction. Because once he was gone, people began replaying the past. His subtle comments, his concern, his calm framing. And suddenly, my calm didn't look unstable. It looked strong. My manager invited me into her office. She closed the door, sat down, and said quietly, I'm sorry. That was all. No defense, no excuses, just a truth arriving late. I nodded once. Thank you. She hesitated. Are you okay? This time the question sounded real. Yes, I said. I am. And I meant it. Because here's the part no one expects. The best revenge isn't seeing someone suffer. It's watching your own nervous system stop reacting to them. It's walking into work without scanning rooms for their mood. It's having a life that doesn't tighten when their name appears. It's smiling because you're actually happy, not because you're trying to prove anything. Weeks later, I ran into him by accident outside a building downtown. He looked different. Less polished, less protected by context. He saw me and froze for a second, like his body remembered the version of me he used to control. Then he tried to regain composure. Vivian, he said carefully. I stopped not for him, but because I didn't run anymore. He swallowed. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I held his gaze. It was already far when you started it. His face tightened. You know what everyone thinks now. I nodded. Yes. He waited, expecting me to say something comforting, something that would restore balance, something that would prove I was still the softer one. I didn't. I smiled lightly. Take care. His eyes narrowed. That's it? That's it, I replied. And I walked away. No speech. No dramatic closing line, because my power was no longer in what I could say. It was in what I didn't need to. Back home, I opened my laptop, looked at the notes folder, and for the first time, considered deleting it. Not because I wanted to erase what happened. Because I didn't need to carry it anymore. I didn't delete it. I simply moved it into an archive. like a document from a life I'd outgrown. Then I made dinner, played music, opened my windows, and let my apartment fill with air. The city hummed. The lights glowed. And I realized the most satisfying part of the entire story wasn't that he lost control. It was that I gained myself. He told everyone I was crazy. And I never once had to prove I wasn't. I just kept living, steady, precise, unbothered until the truth became the only story left standing.